Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here and welcome back to another video. This week we are kicking off our first session of Camp Create on the MFT YouTube channel and blog. And today I am your camp counselor and we are going to be doing a fun activity called Wonderful Watercolor. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do watercolor. There are so many different supplies that you can use to create your different looks. So for your homework for this camp activity, you can use any watercolors you want and create any effect you want. You can do no-line watercoloring, you can watercolor images, or you can do like I'm doing and create a background effect. So for my watercoloring, I'm going to be using Ken Oliver Colorburst powders. These are really great if you want really concentrated color. And what I have here is his Galaxy collection. So it has 5 different colors of Colorburst powders, and it also has a platinum Colorburst, which is actually a liquid, and you're going to see us use that a little bit later in the video. Now I've also included our Tropical Teal Colorburst, which is a custom color that we created with Ken Oliver, because I wanted to add a little bit of teal to the backgrounds I'm going to create. So what I'm doing first is I'm taking all of my different powders and I'm just kind of tapping them into a little palette. You don't want to press on the bottles and kind of squish them because the color powder will go everywhere and you're going to have a huge mess. So I recommend just kind of setting them over top of the area you want to put them and just kind of tapping on the bottle to release the powders into your little palette. I also have a couple of watercolor brushes. I end up only using one. I have a size 12 and a size 8, and I did use the 8 for the entire cards. And then I also have some Ken Oliver watercolor paper here that we're going to use to watercolor on. I'm taping my paper down onto my work surface with some purple tape, and I'm going in with the plan that this purple tape is going to create a border on my background, and I'm going to use the entire panel. And I'm also doing another one here where I'm kind of creating a triangle pattern. Now you're going to see when we get farther in the video, I end up actually cutting both of these pieces. I did get quite heavy with my water and my paint, and I ended up bleeding under all of these tape pieces. So you're just going to see later in the video that even though I had planned to use the full panels, I definitely can make it work with what I have, and I just trimmed the pieces out. So to start off here, I have some water here on screen, and I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm going to fully saturate the areas where I want to do the backgrounds. Now for this effect, like I said, I'm doing a galaxy background, so I want all of the color to really blend together. And what we start with is definitely not what we're going to end up with. So it's just kind of a process to get the colors that you want to show through on your galaxy. So I'm fully saturating the paper, getting it really nice and wet. And then I'm going to start to go through and pick up different colors of my Colorburst powders. So I'm just taking my paintbrush and I'm wetting it in the water. And then I'm dipping it into those powders, and that's going to really pick up that color and give me that vibrant color that I'm adding to each of those areas. So for this galaxy, I started with some really light colors. I have some greens, yellows, and then a little bit of like an orangey red. And then I started to go in with the really bold colors. So I have this really dark maroony purple, and then I have this really dark tropical teal color. And one thing to keep in mind when you're creating a galaxy is it's going to look like a big hot mess before it looks like anything that resembles a galaxy. So right now it just looks like a lot of different watercolors that I've kind of mixed together, and it has a really cool effect just like this. So if you wanted to just create kind of like a tie-dyed background look, this is a great way to do that. But since I am going for galaxy, I'm going to continue to add color and really mix these in and get this really nice and dark. If you want a brighter galaxy, just don't use as much of the brighter colors. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue to bring in that really dark purple and that really dark teal. I almost want them to look black when I have the galaxy finished, so that's why I'm adding so much of these colors. If you find you get a little bit too much water on your paper, you can use a paper towel and just kind of dab that up. But I was pretty happy with this, and I fully let them dry. So you can see now I fully let them dry, and they are kind of faint. The colors really dry back quite a bit. And now I'm going to come in with that liquid platinum that I mentioned earlier. So this is like a silver pearlish color, and when you put it onto your surface, it has this really vibrant shimmer to it. So I added a little bit of that watercolor into a little plastic container with a little bit of water just to kind of thin it out a little bit more. And then I'm just using my paintbrush and I'm kind of tapping it over both of the papers there to let that fall onto my surface. Now you can do two things here. You can let this sit and fully dry, and you're going to end up with these little splotches of shimmery color. It's going to dry back quite a bit when it soaks into the paper, but it has a really cool effect if you just let it dry as is. But what I wanted to do was actually mix it into my background and have that shimmer kind of going throughout the entire background. Now I also wanted to add a lot more dark color because these galaxies are not as dark as I want them to be yet. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my paintbrush and I'm going into that really dark purple color, and I'm using a lot of the powder so I have a lot of pigment on there. And then I'm mixing it into my panel starting on the edges to really darken up the edges. And I'm bringing my paintbrush into the center with less pigment and more water. And I'm mixing it into all of those drops of that platinum color burst that I added. And since it's still wet, it's blending into my color. And we're getting this really cool effect where we have this shimmer kind of going throughout the entire background. When you tilt it up, it looks a little bit different right now when you're staring at it. It really picks up that silvery platinum look. But once we finish this and we kind of tilt the panels in the background, you're going to really see how this shines and sparkles. Now to finish it off, I did want to add a little bit of white paint splatter just to look like stars in my galaxy. So I did add some acrylic paint to a block. I added a little bit of water to thin that out as well, and then I used my paintbrush and kind of flicked it off. Okay, so now you're going to see, like I mentioned earlier in the video, that when I removed the tape, these panels are fully dry now. I did have quite a bit of bleed through underneath of the tape since I did use so much water on the edges when I was trying to darken up my galaxy. So I'm going to end up using my paper trimmer and just cutting these out and adding them to a separate card base. So no worries at all. It wasn't exactly what I had planned, but it worked out fine on the finished card. And then as I remove this tape, you just also want to be careful that you don't rip your paper if you do want to use the panel as is. So I did end up with one small tear on the top there, so I did start it from the other direction to minimize how much of that paper I was tearing. But at this point, it didn't really matter since I was going to trim that all off anyway. So I'm just going to take both of these. You can see as I tilt them, we have that really cool effect where you get the really dark galaxy, but then when you tilt it in the light, you see all of that silver shimmer. Okay, so let's go ahead now and trim these out. I'm just going to put them in my paper trimmer. I'm not doing any type of measuring. I'm just kind of putting them in so I know I can get all of the white edging off. And I'm just going to go ahead and trim this up, and then we're going to add both of these pieces to a separate white card base. And since we did use quite a bit of water on these panels, they do have a little bit of warping on them, so I'm going to use quite a bit of score tape to adhere these onto my card bases. This is just going to ensure that they adhere nicely down and stay completely flat on our finished card. Okay, so once I have these adhered on, they look exactly the same as I had originally intended. I did change up the direction of the triangle piece. I was going to do a portrait card and have it coming from the right-hand side, but I did decide to change that up and make it a landscape card and have it coming over from the left-hand corner. The unicorns I have on screen there are from the new Fairy Tale Friends stamp set, and I stamped and colored those with some very faint colors. I didn't want to use something super dark because I really want the galaxy to be the highlight of the card, since that is the focus of what we're creating. So I just used some very soft colors, some purples and aquas, and I had originally intended to have the aqua unicorn on the larger panel, but I liked it a lot better with him over on the triangle panel. So once I kind of looked at the two cards for a minute, I decided to switch those up and I put him over on that one. And then I'm going to create a cloud design on the larger one and put that purple-haired unicorn on that one. So for the cloud here, I have the Stitch Cloud Edges Die-namics. That's what I used to trim this out. And I just have a large piece of white cardstock and I trimmed an edge on it. Figured out exactly where I wanted to adhere it on there and just use some score tape. And now I'm just using my scissors to trim off the excess from the card front. And this is just going to create a little cloud bank that we can add our little unicorn in. So I used liquid glue and put that all over the back of this unicorn. And then I decided to tuck his back legs in behind the clouds and have his front legs kind of sticking out in front. And I really like the look of that where it kind of looks like he's standing down in the clouds. For the sentiment on this one, I decided to stamp out my sentiment on some black licorice cardstock using Versamark ink. This is just a clear sticky ink that lets us add embossing powder. So I am applying the white embossing powder directly over top, and then I'm going to take this to my heat tool and heat set it to make that embossing powder kind of be shiny and raised on the cardstock. Once I had that fully heat set, I die cut it with the Skinny Strips Die-namics, and now I'm using the same liquid glue and I'm adhering this to the top area of the card. I did want it to hang off a little bit from the one edge, so I let it kind of hang over and use my scissors to trim off the excess, and that is going to complete that card design. For the second card, I stamped the sentiment directly on the card base, kind of in the same position as that triangle piece of galaxy that we have coming from the corner, and then I put my unicorn onto the card with some foam adhesive for a little bit of dimension. I am taking a Copic marker. This is a W2 and a W0 Copic marker, and I'm adding a little bit of shadows underneath of the unicorn's feet on both of the cards. This just helps to ground them and make them look like they're not kind of floating in air on the card design. And then once I have both of the shadows on the unicorns, the last thing that's left to do is add a little bit more sparkle and shine to these cards. I love all of the platinum color bursts we have in the background, but I decided I wanted to add some clear sequins for a little bit of dimension on the cards, and I'm also going to add some sparkle to the unicorns. So I added the sequins and filled the centers with Stardust stickles, and then I'm taking those same stickles and I'm adding them to the unicorn wings. And this is just a really sparkly glitter glue that is really going to make those wings shine on both of my unicorns. Okay, so once we have that done, our cards are complete, and we have these really cool galaxy cards where we have this sparkle and shimmer in the galaxy, and we have all of these great colors that we've combined with the Colorburst powders to create a really cool watercolor background effect. So now it's time for you guys to complete your camp activity for today, which is wonderful watercolor. Make sure to check out the video description below for all of the details for Camp Create. You'll find a link to the blog post to submit today's camp activity and all of the giveaway details as well. So thank you so much for joining me for day 1. We'll be back tomorrow with a new activity and a new camp counselor. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.